All right, everybody, it's 2 o'clock, so we'll get things started. Welcome to Blue Stream Fiber's latest webinar series, focusing on unlocking community value, retail to bulk explained. We thank everyone for their time out of their busy schedule to hop on with us and learn a little bit about some of the benefits they could find with telecommunications for their associations. For today, the agenda, we'll do some introductions. We'll talk about the overview of retail to bulk services, why the transition matters, right? Key considerations for board members and property managers when thinking about what's best for your community and how to go about it. We'll have some key takeaways and a case study, and then we'll talk about next steps, and we'll allow time for a Q&A. So just a note about today's webinar. Not really going to be a traditional presentation with slides, if you were looking for that. We've got a great panel today, so it's going to be a little bit more conversational and I think a little bit more valuable for your time. There is a place for you to put your questions in, and Kate, who I'll introduce in a second, will be monitoring that. And we'll hold off on answering them till the end. We'll allow about 10 to 15 minutes for that. But please know that we will answer all your questions because we definitely value your input. As far as introductions, we're going to start first with our panel member and expert, Frank Mambuca. He is a telecommunications consultant here in the state of Florida and also works nationally. He's got 40 years of experience, including some leadership roles at Level 3 Communications, Summit Broadband, and U.S. Metropolitan Telecom. But more importantly, Frank is also a fellow board member, right? So he's on a board at his community, donates his time and skill for the betterment of the community. So, he's able to look at this topic from both sides, right? The side as a telecommunications expert, but also as an HOA board member and understand some of the challenges that you have. Also with us today is Kate Grutzmacher. She is Senior Vice President of Sales for Blue Stream Fiber in the Texas market, but also comes with 25 years of experience from the HOA side, working for property management companies primarily. So can definitely speak to some of the challenges from an association perspective when thinking about contracts, how to manage your board and community, and how telecommunications fits into that. And lastly, myself, Keith Minarik, Vice President of Sales for Florida on the East Coast. And my background is from the television side. So before I came into telecommunications, worked at Viacom, sold MTV and TV Land. So I understand that side of the business. But welcome everybody to the webinar. Super excited you're here. We've got a great conversation coming, and thank you for your time. So first, we'll kick things off thinking a little bit about retail services, some of the things that may be a challenge for your residents and for boards and property management teams. And as far as pricing and collection of bills and negotiation power, et cetera. I think we'll start things off a little bit talking about the right way to understand what's important or valuable to your community, with a little bit of knowledge on how to go about finding out what your residents are looking forward to. And we recommend you do a survey, right? So, if you've got a provider come in and give a little bit of information about what's available is always helpful, but it's good to get out in front of things and really find out from your residents, what are the problems that they may be having or what they think could be a little bit better. And with that in hand, it'll really give you confidence and a little bit of direction, so to speak, tea leaves on which way to head. But when thinking about this, I want to kick over our first question to Frank to get things started. But from your experience, when we're thinking about pricing, do you have a good idea of how much the average resident in the state of Florida is paying for retail television and internet service?
Yeah, Keith, thank you. Yeah, we work with my firm works with lots of homeowners associations and condo associations across Florida. And what we're seeing when a homeowners association is on a retail basis for a bulk service to include internet and TV, we're seeing pricing of anywhere from $175 to $250. People are just buying with the buying power of one, and so that's what they get, whether you're behind the gate within an association or just out on a common street in the community. So we're seeing some very high prices, and what we love about bulk versus retail is that the association gets to buy with the power of the number of units in the community. So it's like buying from Publix or buying from Costco, right? When you can buy in bulk, you're just going to get much better rates than you can on a retail basis.
Right. And that pricing is much more consistent, right? From a bulk perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the keys, I think, and I think we'll get into that eventually about how these contracts work is when you get a bulk agreement, you're going to get a guaranteed annual increase over the course of the term of the bulk agreement. Whereas on a retail basis, you're at the mercy of the provider, and we're seeing retail increases in price from 9 to 12% every year, whether
Mhm.
they do it in fees or surcharges or product price increases where in a bulk agreement, you get a guaranteed percentage increase year after year. So it's easier to budget and easier for the association to manage over time while saving incredible amount of money based on bulk buying versus retail buying.
Right, right, absolutely. So definitely good for the old pocketbook and wallet, for
Yeah.
sure. One of the things that we hear quite a bit from folks that we talk to is a little bit of frustration with customer service. To your mind, when you're talking to clients that are in a retail perspective, what kind of feedback do you get from them regarding, customer service and what they wish could be a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, I would answer that in two ways. One is just first and foremost, the industry that we're all growing up in or grew up in working here is notorious for customer service, right? It's
Mhm.
just
Right.
bad customer service. So I think companies like Bluestream and other competitors that are entering the market know that one of the key differentiators they'll have is better customer service. So it's a key component of the bulk providers coming in. Furthermore,
Mhm.
as a board member myself, I'm naturally very close to my property management firm and speak to the property manager on a regular basis. And it was just so frustrating for him have to deal with owners having issues with the cable TV and telecom providers. Just they would get so frustrated they'd go to the property manager. And
Right.
with a bulk arrangement, you actually get an assigned account manager to handle the issues for the association members. If they do have issues that can't be handled right away in the call center. So having that individual to deal with has just been a real lift of a burden for the property managers in dealing with some of the issues that the owners go through. So I find that the customer service improves, and then just the way that you interact with the company in a bulk basis improves as well.
Right. So even though there might not be a contract with a provider, if one of them are in your community doing work and you have some questions or services and where you'd like it to be, there's just the general thought that, the HOA or the property manager could help, but there's really not a person with that provider in a retail perspective to turn to.
Yeah, like I live in a single family home community, and suddenly we have a bunch of rain in the summer, and
Mhm.
there's this orange cable laying on your grass. And the homeowner's like, "Oh, what's this?" And they call the property manager.
Right.
And what's the property manager going to do? It's a coaxial cable that's coming from the pedestal to the side of the home that washed up because it's direct buried in the ground. Um, so those
Mhm.
kinds of issues, I think, go away with a lot of what the infrastructure looks like on a bulk basis.
Right. Yeah, I know all about the seeing that cable when the
Yeah,
mulch level goes down for sure.
yeah,
Um, from a billing and collections perspective, how have you seen these bulk contracts be able to help out?
yeah. So I think one of the key things, the differences between retail and bulk is the association is going to pay for a certain set of bulk services we call the bulk package that are common to the majority of the community. So that's going to be collected in the association dues and will be part of a regular dues payment by the owners. I'm sorry, the members of the
Mhm.
association. So I call it the left pocket, right pocket. So we talked a little bit previously about the prices that people are paying on a retail basis. So they're going into their right pocket and paying 175, $250 to the provider for that same set of services. Now they'll be going into the left pocket and paying, 75, $80 to the association, who in turn gets billed directly by the provider. So I think that's, the key is to understand, the individual bill from the provider is going to go down to an association member, and then their association dues are going to go up to get the bulk package and be able to buy with the buying power of the association. I live in an association. You mentioned before, I'm on a board on the committee of 2,600 units. And when we negotiated together as a power of 2,600, we got a phenomenal rate for a set of services that everyone in the community uses, and we
Mhm.
pay for those in our association dues, and our provider bills the association.
Right. And so a little bit more money staying in that right pocket, right?
Yeah,
Which is
exactly.
good. You know, how
Like like
have you
50%.
50%? It's a lot of
Yeah,
money, right? It's a lot of
yeah,
money.
yeah.
Have you seen boards use this as a way, the bulk agreement as a way to help with late payments and folks are a little bit behind on their association dues?
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting, right? As a board member, when we have individual owners who are not paying their association dues, there are several different things you can do to try to get them to pay. And the worst case scenario and the last resort is to put a lien on the home and then wait till they sell the home and then make the money back from the new owner coming in via the purchase agreement. And it just takes a long time, and we've had that. And so what's great about a bulk agreement, we recently had an issue where a certain homeowner didn't pay, I think, 5 quarters of dues and was just holding out, not paying. And it happened to be January, and the guy loves football, so we were coming into Super Bowl Sunday, and part of our bulk contract states that we can shut off an individual's bulk services, telecom services, for lack of payment. And so we let the owner know that we would be shutting off the services. And, the week before the Super Bowl, suddenly all the payments came in because he
Yeah.
didn't want to miss the Super Bowl. So yeah,
Must have
it's
he must have been an Eagles fan. So good leverage there. Good leverage there
well,
for
I thought you
sure.
meant he must have been an Eagles fan because he didn't pay his bills. But anyway,
We'll table that discussion. We'll
yes,
table
yes.
that discussion. Now I think we've talked about some of the challenges that communities can face in a retail perspective. And I want to flip the script a little bit and talk about some of the additional benefits that, and we touched on some of these earlier, but maybe, talk about the community value and appeal. There seems to be a lot of building that's going on in the state of Florida, but also, a lot of communities and neighbors of yours that may have already had the fiber optic upgrade come through the community. So maybe talk about that from, your perspective, the value of how telecommunications can either hold the
Yeah,
value or increase the value for a community.
yeah. I think it's a great item. I think the key to the bulk is not really just the price, it's the infrastructure upgrade. So
Mhm.
first I would talk about the infrastructure that is likely to be in a community today in our area.
Mhm.
It's a hybrid fiber coax network, meaning there is some fiber, but it goes to an HFC, hybrid fiber coax node, and then from there it's coax in the ground and coax to your home.
Mhm.
And coax cable is made of copper, and copper hates three things. It hates water, lightning, and heat. And what do we have in Florida? Water, lightning, and heat. So there's
Right.
constant issues with that coaxial cable and constant issues with the services that you're receiving over that. I also like to point out, as originally a New Yorker myself, the Statue of Liberty was made of copper, and the Statue
Right.
of Liberty is green
Hmm.
because it's oxidizing, just like the cables in the ground are, particularly when they're directly buried, as we just referenced before. So one of the key things about this project is the upgrade to fiber brings fiber directly into the unit. And from there, everything connects wirelessly. So you eliminate all the copper cable in the street, all the copper cable in the walls of the home or in the condo, and everything becomes upgraded. And furthermore, you can find places online that will tell you that fiber connected communities have an increase in value of properties anywhere from 3 to 5%. I can't speculate on that. I'm not a realtor, but I will tell you that I get calls from realtors talking about lots of people moving into town, particularly from the north, and working from home because that's the trend. And they want to know, is this a fiber connected community? Because they need highly reliable and high speed internet services. And so they'll ask me, and I pretty much know the answer for particularly with the communities that I work with, and it's very helpful. So many times I'm talking to some of my client communities, and they say, everybody around us has fiber. We have to get on this train. And it's like, yeah, you don't want to get left behind. Upgrade the infrastructure in the community, future proof the community, because fiber is the best mode of connectivity for telecommunication services.
Yeah, absolutely. How have you, in your experience, how have you seen the needs of the residents change over the last 5 years when it comes to telecommunications?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's changing, very rapidly. So first and foremost, the internet has become a utility just like water or electricity, right? You need to have it, and you need to have it 12 months a year, right? So it's not like I go up north and I shut off my internet any longer. Whether you're a full-time resident of your community down in the south or a part-time resident, when you're up north, you're accessing your home devices like thermostats and pool filters and water detection devices, et cetera. And so you need that internet all the time. So there's this issue of shutting services on and off, not really an issue anymore because the bulk services will be available 12 months a year. So I find that the internet is critical. As we talked about, the work from home becomes so important. So having high speed fiber connectivity. Furthermore, in addition, once you're in the home with the fiber, you're going to connect wirelessly. So you need some excellent Wi-Fi mesh systems. I know that Bluestream uses an excellent approach with the Plume system, and I find that to be very effective for the work from home group. Then when it comes to the television, what I find is that because there are no more cable TV companies, there are streaming TV companies like Bluestream. You can actually take that TV with you. So you can pay on a bulk rate for television service in your association. And then when you go back up north, instead of paying another $200 a month for TV, all you need is internet. And wherever you go, you take that TV with you via an app or even with a mobile set-top box. So it's really been a significant change in the way that services are provided and the way that they're consumed.
Right. So for the snowbirds, even more money in that right pocket for them, right?
Yes, good way to put it.
Excellent.
Real quick,
Go
real
ahead,
quick,
Kate.
quick question. So, I think that there's always this question on a retail basis, the customer service or the lack thereof of customer service. And with bulk agreements, oftentimes there's, some level of account management or one single point of contact should they need any support. Can you talk a little bit about that and explain a little bit more about the value that brings to not only the community, but also the property management team?
Yeah, we hit on this a little bit earlier as well. But first and foremost, the bulk providers that I'm aware of, they all have call centers that operate 24/7, 365 with excellent performance, answering calls in less than 30 seconds, et cetera. All the call centers are here in the United States, so you're getting people that speak English, as the way we speak it. So that's always a plus from what you're used to on a retail basis, calling into various other offshore call centers. But in addition, if you have an issue that is not being handled quickly by the bulk provider on the call center, they have an account manager assigned to the community, and that account manager is available to the property manager, to the board members, for individual issues, systemic issues, things that are just taking a little bit too long to handle. So that account manager is really the goal of changing that customer service experience that is traditionally experienced from telecom providers.
Thanks.
Yeah, great. And while we're thinking about that, Frank, I know that 10 years ago, a lot of the questions that boards had for providers were, how many trucks do you have, right? Besides how many channels you have. Talk a little bit about, by having that fiber optic infrastructure put in, what does that do to the amount of truck rolls, the need for so many trucks in your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we talked about all of the issues with the elements that impact copper cable. The fiber cable is a piece of glass. It's fairly impervious to the elements. The glass that I installed in the ground in the 1980s is still there operating today. What changes is the electronics or optronics at the ends of that piece of glass that continue to get upgraded and improved. And so with the cable that you have there today, the technicians today at copper are out chasing noise, chasing nicks and water damage, et cetera. That goes away with fiber. And then you end up with high level electronics in the home and in the company's office. And those things are remotely accessible so that you can check and see what's going on. So there's really hardly a need for a truck roll. And a lot of the telecom companies today are proactively seeing issues on the network with the elements talking back to their network operations centers so that you don't even have to wait for a telephone call from the customer. So a lot of these things, I had in my career working in commercial entities have now become part of the residential market because of the fiber and the increase in the electronics capabilities.
Yeah, great. So kind of lose that need for so many trucks, right?
Yeah, and you know what I find interesting about the truck rolls as well is there still are enough trucks and companies like your own where I find that, you know, if you have a problem and you call, you know, people are dispatched the next day, same day if you call early in the morning. So it's been just a different experience with customer service than is traditionally experienced in this industry.
Right, for sure, for sure. And you know, with this slide, obviously it's tilted a little bit towards, you know, favorability of a bulk contract. You know, with lower cost, higher value, better service, a lot of benefits. But you know, if I'm an HOA board member or property manager, I'm thinking, sounds great, but how much is it going to cost me to bring this infrastructure in? And from your experience, you know, do you have an idea of what the fiber providers are charging for the installation?
Yeah, that's another amazing thing to me as a board member dealing with changing over to bulk. There are going to be several $1 million of expense by the companies installing this fiber network, installing all of the new equipment, et cetera. There is no upfront cost to the association. There's no one-time charge. There's no need to do a special assessment. Oh, we need to come up with $100,000 to pay this company. All of the costs, all of the capital required to build this network will be spent by the provider to build it, and then to turn up the services on that network. And then the very first time an association is going to receive an invoice is for the first month of actual services that are being provided to the owners. So there is no upfront cost. It's all taken on by the provider, and that's why these contracts are normally 10 years in length. We get lots of protections in the contract that I'm sure you're going to ask me about later on. But there needs to be time. They amortize their costs over the course of the contract, and then they have a payback period, a return on investment that they expect. And I think, you know, as an association, myself, we want to make sure our provider is successful. It's a partnership. We're not trying to beat them down. So what is amazing though is you get this upgraded infrastructure, better services, and a reduced cost, and there's no upfront charge, and you start paying when you start receiving the service.
Services started. Right. I knew the answer, but you know, I definitely wanted to get your perspective on it. So unlike,
Yeah.
you know, if you put in a new pool or new roof for the clubhouse or, you know, some new blacktops for the streets, that's an outlay for the association. But here you're getting an upgrade in that internet amenity / utility, and there's no expense to the association.
That's right.
All right, so when evaluating retail to bulk transition, board members and property managers should carefully assess several factors to ensure the best outcome for the community. And with that in mind, here's some of the most important things you should take into consideration. You know, and Kate, I know this is definitely in your wheelhouse coming from HO perspective. So I'll let you know, you and Frank kind of talk about this. But as far as like upfront costs and long-term savings, you know, I kick it over to both of you if you have an opinion or ideas how this can help a community.
Well, I mean, I think it's the whole model itself. There's so much value, and I always hear when we talk about this with people that this is not a familiar concept, and they're like, well, it's just too good to be true, right? And you hear it all the time. And it feels like it, but it really isn't. The value is there. You're leveraging the community to drive quality, price, and service to the best of you know, that the community deserves. And it's an outstanding model, and I wish I could do it in my single family home. Right?
For
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, you're so right. We're having a town hall meeting, and one frustrated, angry owner said, okay, so I'm getting a brand new infrastructure, I'm getting better services, and I'm going to pay less money. He said, what am I, an 8-year-old on Christmas morning? And I said, well, if you want to be, we have to agree on doing this. And it's true. It's very difficult to believe that this all comes together, but it's because of you're bulking, you're buying with the power of the entire association, and you're entering into a long-term partnership with the provider.
Right. I think also too, from a property management perspective or for a community, you know, you're only the association generates the money from the assessments to pay all the bills, right? And year over year, having some predictability and understanding what that increase of escalation of cost will look like. So there isn't this outlying variable of we might see a 10% increase in this line item in the budget. So that gives some real good foundation for future planning and strategy for financial towards the financial outcome of the community, which helps everyone, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I used to get questions all the time. Well, what are the assessments going to be next year? I wish I had a crystal ball, right? Well, in this one line item, one of many in a budget, this is one that you will always have that predictability and know exactly what the next increase is going to look like.
And from a financial perspective, there's other great advantages to the association that we enjoyed in my association when we went to bulk. One is in our common areas, we were spending money on, internet and TV service at the pool, the clubhouse, et cetera, and to the tune of, paying $1,000 a month for these services. And with the bulk agreement, the provider provided at no charge all services in the common areas that they were providing within the bulk. So you do a internet and TV bulk. We had internet and TV services provided at no charge in the common areas, which reduced our bill over $1,000 a month. They came out to like $13,000 a year, eliminated from the budget by going to a bulk. And then the other thing is that the providers that are coming in will pay a door fee, so they pay an amount of money per door to kind of help offset any kind of challenges or issues you might face. So in some cases, you're getting in several $100,000 income that you can then use in your reserve line items or any other, special projects that the community is looking to do. I just worked with a client who was doing a bulk agreement at the same time they were building some brand new pickleball courts, and they built the pickleball courts with the door fee payment that they received from the bulk provider.
I suspect that this could be the door fee specifically, and that additional opportunity to generate some revenue back to the association could be impactful to help offset some of those rising insurance costs for master policy insurance, and also help, maybe bridge the gap from a reserve funding perspective with this the new mandates in Florida, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, the reserves is critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so living in an HOA myself here in Southeast Florida, I know that pickleball courts are not cheap, even though there's high demand. They're shockingly expensive, right? So, so let's say, Frank, I'm an HOA board member, and this sounds great, right? I see all the benefits, things how it could help my association, my community, my neighbors. But we traditionally have pretty low HOA dues from a monthly or quarterly perspective. How do you recommend going about incorporating this new telecommunications bulk bill, into the condo or HOA fees?
Yeah, I mean, there is undoubtedly going to be an increase in the association dues, and we talked about the whole left pocket, right pocket, and being able to understand that. But as a board member myself, we just look at what is the right thing for our community. And we increased our dues by 20% or so when we added in our bulk agreement. It was a substantial increase because we had low dues, and it was well worth it based upon what we were saving, plus the benefits to the community relative to the door fee, the reducing of the common area services we were paying for. And so, and just having, a better set of services and better set of infrastructure in the community. We socialized it with the community. We did a survey of the community. We make sure to get the voice of the community that we talked about at the outset of this webinar. And so we move forward, and like I said, it's a great savings, and I think as you see in the state of Florida, most associations are in bulk agreements. And when the board understands the benefit and the value, they always go toward a bulk. So that's been my experience.
Yeah. So, and just as far as like rate predictability, we know most double play bulk contracts, the annual increase is going to be about 4%, give or take. Are you aware, or do you have an idea of what the retail increases typically are year to year?
Yeah, it's about 9 to 12%.
Right.
Right.
right?
It
So
comes in every January.
yep. Yep. So that over the course of 8 to 10 to 12 years, that difference will snowball
Absolutely.
for sure.
Absolutely.
And we talked about, the financial aspects for these benefits to the communities, but what about flexibility? What kind of flexibility do you find from the providers here with their contracts?
Yeah. You know, um, we kind of talked about in the beginning in my intro there.
Mhm.
So I'm 40-year veteran in the telecommunications industry. I worked in telecom my whole career, and I'm the on my board of my association when it turned over from the developer since 2004. So some 20 years ago. But about 7, 10 years ago, I started consulting and helping associations with these contracts where I kind of sit in the balance between homeowners associations, condo associations, and these providers. Having been on both sides of that equation, I can truly assist with navigating and negotiating a good deal. And so we've had some really good changes and additions to bulk contracts over the past several years. These are long-term commitments, so we need some flexibility within them. So first and foremost, I will negotiate something in there called a technology clause. And a technology clause basically says that the current provider will keep up with the Joneses. Right. So keeping up with what competitive providers are providing. In addition, keeping up with what the current provider is providing to a new community. Why should they upgrade you? You're already installed. Well, we get that into the contract. So you always stay up to date with technology.
Mhm.
Furthermore, we get in there product changes, so increases in internet speed over time, right? So what we negotiate today may be too slow 5 years from now. So we negotiate internet speed upgrades within the contract. And then finally, service level agreements. So something that traditionally has never been in a contract from a telecom
Right.
provider is we're going to put for the residential world, we're going to put service level agreements in there with commitments to hit those numbers, or we're going to pay penalties, or worst case scenario would be breach of contract and termination of contract for lack of performance. So we
Mhm.
get a lot of protections in those contracts for the long term for the association.
What's a good example, or what's just one SLA? What's a good example, or what you think is like a really important SLA that you usually look to see in a fiber optic and a bulk contract?
Yeah, I think the most critical one is network availability.
Mhm.
So network uptime. So is the service there when I need it? Particularly
Right.
for this work from home crew that is now all over our market. So we look for 5 nines, as they refer to it, 99.999% availability of the network. And so that can be monitored and managed. And then there's penalties for lack of performance. But network availability is the most important item.
Right. That's why we're here today, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, just some final takeaways. We've touched on a lot, we're looking to save the community, money both for the association and for residents. It simplifies, the operation so that, if your residents or the community have challenges or questions, one person to go to. It's good for property values for your home and for the, just the prestige of the neighborhood. Overall, reliable service, like you said, a lot of folks, myself included, have been working from home down here in Florida, especially since COVID, things have changed quite a bit. And it cuts down on, complaints, even if there is no contract between the association and the provider. Sometimes people think that there may be, or they could help out when they can't. Anything that you feel that we haven't touched on, or you wanted to kind of review?
Just when you talked about the work from home item right there, I just thought of one
Mhm.
other item. We talked a little bit about the difference between a copper network and a fiber network. The bandwidth limitations of a copper network creates what's known as asymmetrical internet service. So the download speed is much faster than the upload speed. So some basic companies would provide, say, 500 megabits down and 10 megabits up.
Mhm.
With fiber, it's symmetrical. So if you're going to have 500 megabit service, it's going to be 500 megabits down and 500 megabits up. Why is that important? Because of what you just said. You're working from home. We're on a Zoom call, and there's nothing more than a bandwidth hound than video. So everybody's using Zoom and FaceTime and Microsoft Teams. So you need this, high capacity upload speed to be able to support that type of service. So I think that's another key item why we need to be upgrading our infrastructure to fiber.
Absolutely. Nothing worse than hopping on a Zoom call, hoping that your internet's going to stay up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I have a quick question for you. So I know in Texas, I see this a lot, but, and we can talk a little bit about Florida, but we have providers coming through the public utility easement and doing major construction projects and destroying property, right? And it's really difficult to have them come through again and fix it. Talk to me a little bit about how a bulk agreement for a community that's retail today, considering bulk, how that could maybe, how a bulk agreement may protect them and their community.
Yeah, so so from a construction perspective, the new network that would be installed would be completely designed and approved by the board in advance, and then the entire network is built in the easements underground with conduit. So there's nothing direct buried. All of the transitions between cables are all underground. So none of those ugly pedestals and cabinets that are above ground that you have to, put hedges around. So it's all in the ground. It's all marked so that it can, if anybody's going to dig, it'll be all tagged for the call before you dig center for the people to come out and, flag the ground or paint the street. So it's all designed, known where it is, and then after that, if there are any issues in the community, it's all well known in advance. And while they're building it, they ensure that they don't damage anything, any kind of landscaping, any kind of irrigation. It's all taken care of, and we'll put all of that in the contract to make sure that it's all built properly and that there's no damage to any of the existing network. I'm not sure if that answered that question, Kate.
It did. Okay. I think the piece is if a community has a bulk agreement, the likelihood of another provider coming through and putting their infrastructure in the ground is pretty slim. It would be advantageous for a provider to do that if there's already a bulk agreement for 10 years or whatever the term of the contract. So you're protecting or isolating that community so that you don't have any issues with construction.
It's a good point. In these agreements, there's an exclusivity that the association can't enter into a bulk agreement with another provider. However, there's no exclusivity from the existing network in the ground that people would say, I don't want to use this bulk provider. I'm going to continue to pay for it in my association dues, but I'm going to keep this provider. So the networks will continue to exist and be used. But I have a client that the telephone company has an old twisted pair copper network in the community. And they just reached out to say, hey, we want to upgrade the whole community to fiber. And so the association called me. I called the phone company and I said, do you know that this community is in a bulk agreement? And they said, oh, they are? We're not doing this project. And so they're not going to bother to do that. And you don't have to deal with that whole overbuild construction because they're not interested once you're in a bulk agreement.
So unasked for construction project coming through your community, right?
Mm-hmm.
With no communication, and it's they don't know who's really doing it. It's been a challenge.
So all this sounds fantastic, Frank, and you guys are experts, but really proof is in the pudding. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about a case study of a community that you helped successfully transition from ROE or just retail in general into bulk services. So if you could, I'll give you the floor just to talk, a little bit about the Brooks and how, some of the challenges they had. What were the solutions they were looking for, and how you helped them go through a successful process?
Yeah, great. I think in any time you're having a discussion like this, for those who are viewing, having a real life example, I think is helpful. So the Brooks is a community in the Southwest Florida market. It is a total of 2,070 units. There are 3 associations together inside of this master group. And what they decided to do is the 3 separate boards decided to put together a telecommunications committee. So they had individuals from each of the 3 communities. They solicited and found people with some technology type backgrounds, or at least people that had strong business backgrounds that would then be able to help assist in the process of analyzing the project and selecting a provider. And so they engaged my firm to work with them on the project. First thing we did was create a project plan with some very detailed steps, with dates for those steps, and put it all in a nice Gantt chart, and we used it to guide our process. We sent a letter of an introductory letter, as we refer to it, to the entire community, so they knew we are now taking off on this project. This is what it's going to be. You know, just trying to over communicate to the community to know a committee was created and we're going to be analyzing this bulk opportunity and looking at upgrading our infrastructure. In addition, that letter says we're going to do a survey of the community. So we did a full online survey of the community, asking them questions about how they consume telecom services, what they're happy about, what they're unhappy about, and what they look for the future. We asked them questions about if they understand fiber optics and what it means, et cetera. And so we kind of get a voice of the community. We think the community needs to be participative in this. As a board member myself, I can't say enough how important it is to get the homeowners to participate. So once we got that survey results, we used that to inform an RFP, a request for proposal document that we created, a very detailed request for proposal that was sent to the potential providers. And they had a certain amount of time to look at that RFP. We would hold site surveys at the property with the providers that wanted to come out with their engineers and take a look around. And they used all of that to create their proposal. And we got all these various proposals from providers. They all come as apples and oranges, and then we take it and do our best to cull it down into a side-by-side apples-to-apples comparison report. And then based upon that, we kind of culled it down to a couple of finalists. As it turned out, Bluestream was one of them. And they presented to the boards and the committee. And in the end, the committee made a recommendation to enter into a bulk agreement with Bluestream. And so we went through that whole upfront process, and then the big work begins. So we negotiated a contract. Got that contract executed, and the first step after that was a network design. So we wanted to make sure that everyone on the board and the committee knew where the fiber would be laid, how it would be laid out, et cetera. And if they had any issues, we would, rearrange the routes, et cetera. So we got that done and then got into the construction phase. So you have did I leave out the contract negotiation? I think I did. Yeah. So I said, once we selected Bluestream, we did a major contract negotiation, bunch of red lines back and forth with the attorneys of the association and with us as consultants, and got every one of those agreements that we just previously discussed. Then went into the network design phase, then into the construction phase, building out that fiber, getting fiber into every unit, and then installing the service. This whole process, we often hear people talk about, oh, you need 18 months, et cetera. I say you need 12 months from start to finish. That's a good timeline from the day that you send out the introductory letter saying, hey, we're going to do this project, until the first bill is coming into the association for services being turned up. So I work with my providers to meet that timeline based upon that project plan. So we did this within the Brooks, saved substantial amount of money for the homeowners. I believe our analysis was they were paying about $225 a month for the two services, TV and internet. In addition, one of the things that we get into the contract, we mentioned this earlier, is that we have no idea where the future is going with TV. Certainly the internet will be here as is, just like water and electric. So we get terms in the contract that after a certain period of time, they could drop TV from the bulk package and go to an internet only bulk at a reduced price. So got all of that into the Brooks deal. And of course, these three communities had substantial common areas with tennis. One's a tennis community, the other two are golf communities. We had big clubhouses and pools, and we got all of the common area services at no additional charge as part of the bulk package. So it was a phenomenal project, and I'm happy to say that the launch phase post contract signing was handled very well by the Bluestream team to get that turned up and get everybody educated on the new service. I think that's one of the other key points during the installation phase, is the education that a company like Bluestream provides to the owners so that they know how to use the new services.
A little bit of hand holding in the transition for the residents, right?
That's right. That's right. I don't know if you have any other questions about the Brooks transition.
I have a couple questions. So yeah. I think it's really interesting, and it really demonstrates that this community specifically understood how to communicate with their residents and how to gauge their involvement and participation in this process. Talk a little bit more, Frank, about that communication plan and how that rolled out and what you saw, how it kind of unfolded and the benefit of how they did it.
Yeah. Yeah. To take it step by step, the boards got together and, individually were saying we need to move into this world of fiber optics. I think the draw to fiber was the first thing. We need to get our infrastructure upgraded because there were so many problems with the services in the community. And then once they recognized, the way to get fiber optics and not have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for somebody to construct this network is to go into a bulk agreement, and then we get a reduced price in the bulk agreement. In addition, let's start investigating a bulk agreement. Well, the board members are busy. They have a lot going on. They're not all technically competent per se. So let's go solicit a committee. So they created that committee. And so they informed the whole community who wants to join this committee. And they got the people that wanted to be part of it. I think they might have been a little more than they wanted. So they called it down to, I think, 6. There was 2 per association. And then those folks did the bulk of the work, and along the way, they had regular communications to the homeowners as what was going on. When they engaged with our firm, we did lots of town halls to educate people. But I think the survey was another key component because, as a board, we are here to represent the majority. The vocal minority shows up at all the meetings and makes our lives fun. But we need to get the voice of the community through the survey for those that don't have time to show up to meetings. And so we got a lot of that through that survey. But in addition, then we did have plenty of town hall meetings with, just talking about the project. And then once we got to the end of picking a provider, the finalists that were competing to be that provider had town hall meetings presenting their company and their proposal. Before then, in the end, the committee made their recommendation to the board of who to go with. And then the board selected the provider.
Absolutely. I think just in property management, just in general, right? Everyone receives information differently. Some may like it via email, some might like a text message if there's a capability of doing that. Some might like to attend a town hall. So having those different channels of communication and different opportunities to connect, learn, ask questions seems to have helped move that through the process, which is pretty generally how you would move any large initiative through a community successfully, so that you don't manage to the exception or the people that, the 1% of the community that doesn't feel that this is in the best interest for the community.
That's right. And I found interestingly in the last 8 months or so, the physical town hall has gone away and been replaced with Zoom town halls or Microsoft Teams town halls, which then allow the town hall meeting to be recorded and then a link provided to the owners that weren't able to be there so that they could watch it. So that's been a lot of what we've seen in the last several months. It's great technology, and it gets more and more people to participate in the process.
Yeah, it gives a little bit more flexibility as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're coming up to about 10 minutes left. So we do want to allot some time for Q&A, and a lot of these, savings and future proofing we just talked about, with the Brooks. So I wanted to ask Frank, just regarding the role of a consultant, when's the right time to engage with a consultant, and how do you feel that you can assist a committee and a board through the process?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So, as I said, I'm a telecommunications professional. That's been my life. And I've also been on a board, and I've gone through this process without a consultant. And then when I started doing consulting, I realized this is the highest line item on the budget. It's just going to be because it's a number per unit. And it's something that I think requires subject matter expertise. So I like getting involved right at the beginning. I've been pulled into deals where they're already in contract negotiation, and we add that value. I've been pulled into deals where they already have proposals. I recently just got pulled into a deal where they already have proposals, and they said, "Hey, we want to stop and go backwards and start doing a survey of the community. We didn't get enough input from the community." I think the right time to get involved is right at the outset. I think boards are busy. They have a lot going on. I think the right thing to do is to create a committee, sometimes called a media committee, a telecom committee, IT committee, technology committee, And then that committee should go about picking out a consultant. And there's plenty of consultants to go choose from. And then
That
get
committee,
involved
just
in
real
that
quick.
process that I just defined.
Yeah, that committee real quick. Does it need to be board members? Can it just be residents? Does it need to be a mix?
Yeah, I mean, in the state of Florida, the law says that the president of the board is an ex officio member of every committee anyway.
Mhm.
But I would say that there should be. I've seen it with no board members at all, just
Mhm.
committee members. Then I've seen it with a board liaison who's part of a single board member, and then I've seen it with two board members. Never more, because you can't have a majority of the board on a committee. So sometimes they have no board members at all. Just recently did a deal at Taos Park, and their committee had no board members, and they had such a strong committee chairman that it was just so super well run, and it turned out really well. Actually, they chose Blue Stream. I just realized that as I said it. He did a really good job managing that committee. So you need strong people that are not afraid to particularly stand up to the naysayers who just never want change. One thing we didn't mention this whole process is a lot of owners don't want change, and this is change, but it's change for the better.
Absolutely. I'll tell you from a property management perspective too, it's so important if the board decides that this is an initiative that needs a committee or committee involvement, right? Having a clear committee charter, understanding the guardrails of that committee, understanding the timeline of the project itself, because in homeowner associations and when we're dealing with big decisions, oftentimes I've seen, communities just spin their wheels and take far too long to get to an end result. And I think the other piece is it's so important that the board takes the recommendations of the committee seriously. Otherwise, why have the committee, right?
That's right.
To really understand it, but also create a good roadmap for the committee to be successful.
I agree. I mean, it's very rare that I've ever seen a board not take the recommendation from their committee, but I have seen boards really, force the committee to do their convincing on their recommendation, and they do usually do a good job of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple questions from the chat that I want to make sure we hit on. The first is, there's a master association with 7 sub-associations. The question is this something that needs to be done for the entire development, or can each individual association decide to do this? The neighborhood in question has villas, single-family homes, and a 5-story condominium building.
Yeah, I mean, should I answer that, Keith?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So using my association as an example, we are the master association of 2,600 units, and we have 38 sub-associations. We have high-rise condos, mid-rise condos, low-rise condos, single-family homes, estate homes, villas, etc. And so in our case, we got together way back in 2011, 2012, when we first started our project. And each of the individual sub-associations had its own bulk contract with the incumbent provider for TV only. And the board presidents got together and they elected or voted to have the master negotiate the telecom agreement, because the buying power of 2,600 was better than the individual buying power of each of the smaller 38 associations. And so we ended up with one master agreement. On the other hand, the Brooks is an example we just spoke about. Their 2,070 units combined as 3 associations. They actually ended up with 3 separate bulk agreements for the one community was 300 something units, one was 400 something, one was 800 something units. And so they worked together to leverage all of their units, but then they ended up with individual sub-association contracts. Now, I've also seen master communities where half the community is retail and the other half of the sub-associations ended up in a bulk. So in the example you have where there's 7, if they all can't agree, then just depending on the size, you get a better deal. Only one can enter into a bulk. And what I normally see when that happens is then the second one goes, a couple of months later, because they're like, oh, this looked really good. And eventually they all fall like dominoes, but you can do it as a master or you can do it as a sub.
It's also important to note, so your governing documents may dictate a bit of the authority that the master or the subs may or may not have, depending on how your governing documents were created. So I would recommend that you review your governing documents, speak with your attorney as well to understand the authority of the overarching master and then the individual subs as well. Next question I have is, or that came in the chat was, about the portability of services. So if you've got, you reside in Florida for 5 months of the year and then you go up north, can we just revisit that a little bit? What's the flexibility of services in a bulk agreement and how they can use it elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, so speaking with the two services, internet and TV, and actually internet is connected to your home in the south, and then you will be able to access the items from your home when you're out of home via the internet. So that's standard. But I think the newest thing that's happened in the last year or so is that the quote unquote cable TV companies have all become streaming TV companies. And so whether it's through an app or through a set-top box, you can take the service up north with you and bring your channel lineup up there with you. One of the issues with some of the providers is that because they're regional or local providers, you can't get the local channels up north. So if you're in Southwest Florida, you get CBS Wink, and then you go up to Chicago, you're not going to get Chicago's CBS. So that's one of the issues with each one of the providers is different. But since we're here with Bluestream, Bluestream, their service through DirecTV Stream is a national service. So you can take it with you and you can change your zip code and then get the local channels wherever you are. So that's a major change lately where not only to Keith's point before, you save money in your right pocket in the south, but you save money in your right pocket up north because you can take the bulk television product with you.
Absolutely. There was another question about a roadmap, so to speak, of how you socialize this concept in a community. And I'll tell you that every community is a little different, right? So every community has its own unique characteristics and maybe even pain points. And it's important to customize a communication plan and a strategy that's respective and specific to your community. But generally, Frank, talk a little bit just about, and we only have a minute, but, is there any clear do this, don't do this kind of recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, I think over communicating is the way to go. I don't know that there's much of a don't do this other than don't break your governing documents or your state statutes, right? But I would say when the project starts, you send out, at least we do an introductory letter so that everybody gets communication like we're doing this. It's not like, oh, you've been working on this for 8 months and I never knew about it. But then there's a lot of work that's done by the committee and, nobody knows what's going on. But then when the time is right, there are certain intervals where it's like, okay, time to communicate with the board, time to communicate with the whole community. And then as we talked about before, you have these town hall meetings. And then when you do them online, you can then have them there forever with the link to get to that.
Yeah, from a retail to bulk perspective, I would say don't keep your residents in the dark. Right?
Yes.
Communicate. It's better to get everything, good news, bad news, out in the open and get that feedback. But you don't want to surprise anybody in this process.
Absolutely. Anything else, guys?
If there's no more questions from the Q&A, Frank, what's a great way if there's any board members or property managers that are on the webinar to get in touch with you?
I think you just put it up there on the screen.
There you go.
There I am. Yeah.
Excellent.
So you got my email, you got my phone. Anybody wants to get a hold of me, feel free. That's the perfect way to reach out to me. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And then if anybody in the state of Florida has any questions or interest, I'm available as well and via my email address or phone. We also have you talk about that roadmap on how to go about the process. Frank, I'm sure you could, if somebody contacted you, you could walk them through verse and chapter. We also have a buyer support guide, right? Association support guide that has best practices that we've learned from other associations that have gone through this, and they told us what worked and what didn't and recommendations. So with that, if there are no other questions. I want to thank everybody for hopping on, spending an hour of their day with us. Frank, thank you so much. Your input and experience was really valuable, and I hope valuable to the folks that hopped on today.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Keith.
Yeah, absolutely. You're outstanding. I love it. It's a great perspective from a board member's seat and also, an expert in this industry. Couple things. The recording for this webinar will be sent out within 2 business days, so you will receive that. You'll also be receiving a survey, and we're very interested in hearing feedback about the topics, the conversation, and any other topics that the audience is interested in learning about. We want to hear from you. So please take a moment to complete that survey. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.